trouble in paradise, and by paradise I mean Stillwater, Oklahoma.
That's his nickname, Paradise.
Yeah. Mike Gundy, according to Brett McMurphy and now Pete Thamel and a lot of people, that the board has met about his future there after this 3-9 year. And Pete Thamel is reporting that they have offered him a restructured contract that includes a pay cut, and the money that's coming out of the pay cut will be put towards rev share and NIL, something that I'm sure he doesn't like. And then there's an addendum to that report that if he doesn't take their offer, they will fire him for cause, which is where I get confused, because if you have cause to fire him, then why would you offer to keep him?
Yeah, that part of it, I don't know. I didn't see that exact verbiage in the various reports that I saw. But, folks, this is obviously a pretty big story. I mean, we're jumping right into it for a reason, because Mike Gundy has been a mainstay in Stillwater, Oklahoma for 2 decades, and he's been an institution there. I mean, for a lot of people who were babies that are now like college graduates, Mike Gundy's all they've ever known at Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's as long tenured as you can find in a game that turns over coaches like it's nothing these days. So the fact that we're having this discussion, I think, is kind of out of the blue, but at the same time, you knew that Oklahoma State was going to have to go to the drawing board and tweak some things, change some things, look at some things differently coming off the year that they had. But even still, don't think that ever really crossed my mind it would involve him and his positioning. Mm-hmm. Coordinators, certainly. We saw him, just a couple of days ago, fire both coordinators. And that was a move that I think was pretty predictable, but one that was needed, and one that a lot of Oklahoma State fans called for throughout this season, especially Casey Dunn. That was a name that you heard a lot, and not ever in a good way. But, yeah, this is very interesting, because there's suddenly just a lot of stuff out there, and even a deadline that's been put out there in one of the reports. So you drew on Pete Thamel, and I saw his tweet, and I also saw one from Pete Nakos over at On3, and also from John Holcomb, who is a sports director out in Tulsa. And these three just kind of encapsulated, I feel like, what are all of the various things being thrown around, right? So you kind of touched on it, but from Pete Thamel, Gundy saying that he's the sources tell him that Gundy's in a standoff, right? That he's been given or talked to about a restructured contract. And that's like the one thing I think in all the reporting is like the steady part of this is like there's a restructured contract. Like that is 100%. He's been given a restructured contract to look at and sign, and he's being asked to sign it. And that, I think, across the board is also reporting that there is a pay cut involved with that. Now, Thamel's initial reporting says there weren't many other details, but then John Holcomb adds on that he's been offered a restructured contract for less money. That's all still holding. But then he adds that would also restrict his autonomy when it comes to hiring coordinators. Well, what did he just do this week? He fired both coordinators, so if it restricted his autonomy, that would mean it directly influences the 2 coordinators that he needs to now hire. Yeah. And also, that's taking away some power from the head coach after a long time that I don't know that he's going to like being told you're not going to have full say in who the coordinator hires are going to be. So that part of it is interesting. John Holcomb also adds, the sources tell him Gundy has a 5 p.m. deadline today to make a decision. So that kind of ramps things up just a wee bit.
Let me tell you what's going to happen at 5:01.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what's going to happen. If I know anything about Mike Gundy, it's that he's a measured, calm person. Yeah. And that he will wait this out. Now, I'll tell you what's really going to happen at 5:01. Oklahoma State's going to be looking for a new football coach.
Well, Pete Nakos also says the reduced contract part. So, like, again, that's unanimous across the board. But he also adds that it would come with assurances that he would go all in on NIL. And we know that's not been a favorite thing of his, the whole NIL side of college football. But that he would have assurances, or they would have assurances, that he would go all in on NIL to the point that the dollars that were saved on his contract would be put towards that, as well as revenue sharing. That's according to Pete Nakos. And then he adds, if Gundy does not agree, Oklahoma State will terminate his contract and go look for a head coach. So that's where we are. Those three just kind of all had various details that I thought kind of encapsulated the whole story. So that's why I read all three of those off. So add all that together, and you've got what is a very interesting standoff brewing in Stillwater, Oklahoma right now with a pretty bulldog-headed head coach who's not probably taking kindly to threats, and also a school who's seemingly kind of fed up with the way things are currently working, and they want to change some things up, which is understandable. But I know that I've seen a lot of reaction to this in the past hour or so that's been out there, and I think I tend to lean with the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but I don't know what Oklahoma State maybe has been preparing for either. So this is very interesting, and I don't know if it will actually play out in the next couple of hours, but we've already seen 2 Big 12 head coaching changes. This, by far, though, would be the biggest whopper of them all because this is, like, again, an institution.
2 decades.
Yeah.
2 decades of him being the head coach there. And, you know, I already know the place I would pencil him in if he wanted to keep coaching for spite, which if Jamie Chadwell leaves Liberty, I guarantee you. I mean, and Mike would love it there.
Probably, yeah, probably.
So,
I mean, he would have all the autonomy and be able to do basically whatever he wants, and he could wear whatever shirt he wants, and nobody would complain about it and all that. Yeah, I mean, if he wanted to spite up, that job is going to be there. But, you know, there's also the whole circling back. This isn't like Oklahoma State administration is just suddenly having problems with Mike Gundy. Like, some of this there are still lingering effects from his playing them when it comes to even like the Tennessee job. That was years ago at this point, but like I've seen that get mentioned amongst just some of the other, I guess, flirting that he's done in the past with other schools. But that's the one that I think still is like a thorn in people's sides when it comes to Mike Gundy, was how flirtatious that was and all of that. So that's still kind of hanging out there, especially when all this starts to get dug up about his overall future. So, yeah, I think the man would clearly have options in front of him, but wow, just the fact that we're even here talking about this, and it's not because they had like 4 bad seasons in a row, and it's like, all right, we got to get rid of Mike Gundy, and everybody's like, yeah, dude, like he's totally lost his magic. This is like you had a bad season, and it was really bad, but you've already fired your coordinators, and now you're going to have to give us some assurances or we're going to fire you, and that's a different ball game than we played in a long time.
Look, I think that one of the things that is obvious is that last year they got far. You know, they were in the Big 12 title game, but they've lost that thing twice now, right? And so it's like play and lose in it, bad season, play and lose in it, even worse season. And the bad season after they lost to Baylor by an inch was due to a rash of injuries. Like you have injuries. A lot of times you have injuries that build up over 12 games. Well, theirs built up for about 2. Like they just had 2-3 games where everybody was getting hurt. So you're like, okay. And then, Spencer Sanders wasn't healthy and they kind of mucked up the quarterback thing there. And then instead of committing to finding another quarterback, you had a guy that was 1-to-1 TD to interception last year and thought that was all going to be fine again and didn't even try to upgrade. When you have Ollie Gordon, you've got 3 really good wide receivers on that roster at Oklahoma State, and you didn't upgrade the quarterback, and then when it didn't work out, you were like, well, I'm shocked. Well, there were people all over the place telling you that you had a quarterback that's in his 400th year and the previous 399 weren't really all that great. So,
yeah.
And you can go upgrade. Nobody's telling you to go spend the money that it would cost to get Cam Ward, but didn't even try. And that's going to make the money people mad. And he's got $25 million left on that contract. And I just think that this is floated out there so everybody knows, like, hey, have your agent set it up with us because today at 5:01 we've got an opening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gundy's certainly not done himself some favors at certain points. There's things that could have gone better. I think, though, he's a damn good coach. It does hurt, I think, that you've gone a couple decades and you've had immense amounts of success, but that there's been this inability to, like, really truly cash in and, like, ride that wave. They've always been pretty good to really good to then bounce, after, like, a year like last year, you come back to reality a little bit this year and have a down year that you now need to bounce back from and all of that. I mean, But it's been a pretty steady roller coaster, all things considered, especially compared to a lot of other programs. Like a lot of other programs would love the longevity and the consistency and all that. But I can also understand Oklahoma State fans want a little bit more hardware.
Yeah.
Like some of the more top prizes. But I think we can all agree on this. Is Oklahoma State kind of like not handling this the best, the way they're putting this out there, the ultimatum, the like, hey, you better do this or we're going to fire you. And to your point, you said off the air, like, what's the for cause in this?
Yeah. So
what is the for cause?
If that part of it is true, then they've already decided to fire him. Because if you have a reason to fire him for cause, and that cause can't be losing because that's not how the contracts work, and it can't be just being, bristly, to put it mildly. That's, it doesn't say like, hey, you have to, be Ted Lasso, all around the place. Like, you don't have to do that. So what do you have on him that would fire him for cause? Like, that's to me pretty interesting. And because you're going to try not to pay the buyout, which may be, look, we're going to try to fire you for cause, meaning that we're going to go to court. You're not going to get your full buyout because we're going to negotiate this down. So whatever it is, like this just smells to me like a fired coach. And they've already, if any of this was fine, then we wouldn't really know about it. It would just be the Oklahoma State board meets with Mike Gundy. They've decided to dedicate this much to NIL and revenue sharing, and we're going to pay more for assistance and all of that. But that's not what's happening. They're taking away money to give from him to give to players, and I don't think he likes that. And look, he's under contract, so he doesn't really have to like it. Like they've got an arrangement, a contract, so he doesn't have to like their proposal, and he can say no and go somewhere else. But the bottom line is, you're 3-9, dude. Like, you don't really have, like, all those other years don't matter much because this is now the first year of the 12-team playoff. You didn't even really try to make your team better in a way that other teams did, and you thought everything was going to be fine. Yeah, they're going to start asking some questions.
Yeah, and I could also understand where he just maybe thought they were going to have a really good team this year because everybody thought they were going to have a pretty good team this year. And then they got hit with a couple of injuries like Colin Oliver right there at the beginning, and that sort of just threw them for a loop they couldn't recover from. But, yeah, I don't understand the for cause part. It sounds, like you said, almost as if they've made up their minds, but then that also is puzzling in how they've approached this because they basically publicly put it out there. Everybody now knows what they're doing, and Mike Gundy has a pretty massive buyout, so he could just be like, middle fingers to you all, pay me my 20-ish million or whatever it is, and do they save any money in the long run? Because the money that he's not agreeing to take a pay cut for is going to then be used towards his buyout, right? So, I mean, either way, they're on the hook for some money. Unless he decides to agree to this and takes a pay cut, and then they take that money and they go use it on NIL. But, like, if he says no, they have to then fight with him over the for cause thing. And if they win that, then great, but I don't see how they do because, again, like if there's skeletons in the closet, how are you like blackmailing him with that basically? Yeah. And then if you don't win that case, then you're on the hook for his entire buyout. So I don't know where you're saving money unless he decides like, yeah, okay, but then you've made it so public and he just does not strike me as the type of guy that's going to respond well to you blasting this out in public and saying that you've given him an ultimatum and he better agree or he's getting fired at 5 o'clock. So that's why some people are a little bit puzzled by how this is being handled on the part of Oklahoma State. And it's the curious part. The curious part to me is definitely the for cause part of this, if that's the route they decide to go. But, yeah, various reports out there. And, they have discussed firing him for cause if he doesn't agree. Again, haven't seen any other details on that. But it looks like Oklahoma State's ready to make a big move if necessary, and it's going to depend on what Mike Gundy does in terms of a response here. And I'm assuming like right now and for the rest of this afternoon, and we'll see where that takes us ultimately. But yeah, that is very interesting stuff out of Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yeah, Dustin Archambault, who's a huge Oklahoma State fan in the chat, said, there's a donor that's willing to put $13 million towards his buyout.
Wow.
If that's true, I mean, holy cow.
Can y'all just imagine having that kind of money? Just, you know what? I want this coach out. I'm going to spend $13 million just to get him fired. That's incredible. What a life. Sorry, I'm just thinking about what that would be like to just be able to pull that trigger and just, you know what? I want him out. I'm going to go spend $13 million, but that's that life that I'll never know.
Yeah, that would be one thing to, like, you just go to the AD and be like, listen, me and the other rich a-holes, we're talking.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. We have a group chat. And in the group chat, we all decided that we would like to fire the coach. And you're like, well, it's buyouts $25 million. And you go, and?
Yeah, no, it's sure, okay, I'll take half, and I'll just digest that.
Listen, I'll do 13 because I'm the biggest rich a-hole in the rich a-holes group chat, and then I'll get the rest of it from these guys. You know, I know one guy's in for 6, so, you know, we're already there. You guys throw in $1 million, you know, we'll call it a day.
It's like a tip, like each one of you give $1 million and we'll be here. But I mean, I don't know. I'm sure they've got good intentions. Yeah, there are some a-hole boosters. There are also some good ones as well. I don't know what combination they're dealing with in Stillwater, but clearly there's one of them that's fed up based on that message that we just received. So, yeah, $13 million, if that's true, that says a lot about where the mindset is of some of the power brokers. And, again, he's been there a very long time. You've kind of seen what you've seen. I can understand where some people are coming from, especially those who, like, have the ability to say, here's $13 million to make a change. But you're going to need a lot more than that because that's like half his buyout, and then you're talking about an entirely new coaching staff, including a brand new head coach. So I'd be curious to know how much they've already kicked the tires on. Like if he says, all right, I'm out, and they're like, oh, crap, we didn't expect that. Like I know they've got to have an alternative plan for if that's the case to move quickly and go get their guy. But, man alive, what an interesting standoff brewing, and could be a massive story that, you know, changes the whole face of Oklahoma State football, or it remains as is. And the thing about that is, even if it does that, is that going to be the healthiest relationship if they agree to these terms? I mean, I don't think so, right? I mean, I know in the past he's had his issues here and there, but if you kind of given him this ultimatum, and now it's like, you already had pressure to win, but now it's like you have to win. There's no more 3 and 9s, or else there's boosters out there ready to cut $13 million checks to get your ass out of there. So, I don't know, man. This doesn't seem like it's going to really be all that great for Oklahoma State moving forward if it sticks together based on this afternoon. But maybe they're bigger people than I realize. I don't know, though, man. That doesn't sound good for Mike Gundy.
Yeah. Bill G, $20 super chat. By the way, the higher the dollar amount on the super chat, the more likely I am to say a stupid thing. So, or a thing you maybe hear me say, you know. But Bill G, thanks for the $20 super chat. Gundy is primarily responsible for the leaks. The for cause is something only Gundy has mentioned. Secondly, at his insistence since 2012, he's reported solely to the board and not the AD or president. So thank you, Bill G, for that super chat. Certainly appreciate it. And another 5-1, there's no doubt this will be an expensive episode. I don't see Gundy moving forward at OSU. So, it's going to be like at this point when you've got the coach leaking stuff out and people leaking, it's over. Like, this is over. And if they do get back together, it's like that couple that, you know, comes to you and is like, you know, your friend goes here, the friend like this, we're done. Finally, we're over. It's done. We're getting divorced. And you're like, all right, great. Okay, good. Let's, you know, start picking up the pieces and move on. And then like a week later, they're like, hey, we worked it all out. Like, no, you didn't. You didn't. So. Yeah,
it seems like a toxic couple right now, and you're just kind of waiting for them to say, no, really, it's over this time. But that's very interesting. Was it Bill that said that about the Gundy leaks there? Yeah. So thank you, Bill. And also, who was the other texter?
It's also Bill G.
Oh, okay, Bill. Appreciate you, Bill, on both accounts. But, yeah, I mean, I could see where Gundy would be the one leaking that. And, look, it's working, putting that part of the information out there, because here we all are, right, reacting to that part in particular about, like, what for cause could this be and what could they possibly have? And that's an interesting part of it to put out there. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens over the course of this afternoon and maybe even this weekend. I mean, we don't know for sure about that 5 p.m. deadline, but things not great in Stillwater. You can kind of see it from all angles, though, kind of being fed up with sort of the status quo, also wanting to not spur the man who's been there for 2 decades and led your program to pretty good heights.
Is an alum, is one of your best quarterbacks of all time.
Yeah, like all those things. You don't really want to burn that bridge, but, man, that's really interesting stuff, and I'm just kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, whatever that is, whether it's Gundy agreeing to this or if it's Oklahoma State saying, all right, well, I guess we're going to start a coaching search now, but that's also going to be pretty expensive. So that donor will need to probably pony up more than $13 million, or find some other buddies that chip in with that.
I'm sure they have some.
I'm sure.
Like, they all sit together. And look, they used to have T-Boone Pickens, who they don't anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that works, or if his family, if they still do. I know there's probably a trust or an endowment from him. So it's maybe. Not that, he
has a foundation that still donates tons of money.
Yeah.
So what were you saying there?
So, like, you don't have that one guy that
trigger man, yeah.
Well, and part of it was like T-Boone and Gundy were kind of attached to the hip. And,
right.
That's been not there for a couple of years since he passed on. So I wonder. I will say this about T-Boone Pickens: he's responsible for the nicest media bathroom I've ever been in my life. Because his box is right there on that same level, and sometimes he has to use that bathroom, and he made it very, very nice.
That's smart stuff, right?
Yeah,
like, you know what? I'm gonna put my money where it counts. It's like, I'm gonna have a nice bathroom when I'm watching games. Like that's why he was a very smart, successful man. He had his priorities straight. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously not with us and able to be a part of this particular power play, political struggle, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, I'm curious to see kind of who emerges from this on the other side and what that looks like, and whether Mike Gundy's involved or not. But definitely some leaking going on. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting to the point of Bill G these days, like how much of the narrative is written by social media, and people on either side putting out the certain details they want to kind of form the story. And you can just do it so quickly and in such real time nowadays. So it was very interesting over the last hour or so to see that wave. And that's why I also read those various reports, because you could tell like each guy, the three that I mentioned, all had another little detail that was a little bit different that combined for the clearer picture on what's going on. But yeah, clearly like you get this and you get that, and I'm going to tell you this part, and put them all together, and there's your puzzle there. But there's still some pieces to fill in, obviously, some important pieces to fill in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Matt Ritson, just a couple quick super chats so I don't forget them. Sacramento State's head coach is stepping down to take a job at Stanford, which is pretty well. He was on staff with Troy Taylor at Sacramento State, so now he's just following him there.
Yeah, you got pulled by Andrew Luck. Luck pulling that way. No, as soon as you said Sacramento State, there's that connection there, so that makes sense. And seeing head coaches move on from positions to go take other positions. I mean, Gus Malzahn, the most high profile, and there's various reasons for why you would do that, but certainly seeing coaches at the quote unquote lower levels making the jump up to the D1 is not or that level of power, for football, power to whatever you want to refer to it as. Everybody's got their different angle. You get the point. It seems like a move that makes some sense, and that most people would, or a lot of people would want to take advantage of, especially in this environment where it's just so like when we talk to these head coaches, like being the head coach at Sacramento State, we wonder about the Big 12 or the ACC and the money gaps and all of that. I can imagine being the head coach is great, but you do wonder if there's so many other pitfalls to it that it's like, I'd much rather just go be an assistant coach like at Stanford than deal with being the head coach at Sacramento State, Yeah, absolutely. And there's also just opportunities that you just like, hey, that's the path that I want to take. So, good luck to him, and curious to see how all that works out with the Luck PR machine that was in effect last week with that big announcement that he was coming back, and just how he sort of works that. I'm curious to check in a year and see what Stanford's up to in that regard.
Yep. All right. Other than Mike Gundy, we have some other news to get to. Not a whole lot, but we'll probably talk about Mike Gundy again before the end of the show. And
probably, I would think so. Also, Sacramento State wasn't any good, so that also contributed to you wanting to leave. That had a lot to do with it, and should be mentioned as well that he had not been very successful. But I'm still very interested in the Stanford story nonetheless.
Yep. Brendan Sorsby, staying at Cincinnati, reached a deal to stay there with the school. Threw for 2,800 yards and ran for 445 more, 18 touchdowns, ran for 9 more. Had a good season, not a great season. Started out really well, and then Cincinnati hit the skids. But I think another year there benefits him more than trying to go start again somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, just the wording involved with that. Agreeing to a new deal.
Yeah, that's
is
very
something
professional. Yeah.
Very professional wording there. I don't know how to really take that, but it's just where we are. So, yeah, to see that was initially what was jarring to me. Wasn't surprised to see him coming back to Cincinnati. He was a really good player for them, more so during the first half of the season than the second half of the season. That candle kind of got blown out with the nice start, and then in the end, you lose 5 straight games to miss a bowl game. So you had 5 cracks to win one more game, and you couldn't do it. So, yeah, the Brendan Sorsby hype kind of fizzled out alongside just Cincinnati as a whole down the second half of the season. But that's great news for Scott Satterfield because he is a really good player, and I don't know what their next steps are, but that's a big first piece of the puzzle because I do think he can win them some games, and he proved that earlier in the year. But they've clearly got a lot of other upgrades to do. And, yeah, the most interesting part about that is the – basically agreed to a new deal verbiage there. I would be curious to know what kind of suitors he did have. I mean, we're getting to the point now where it's portal season and it's also going to be like big-time quarterbacks moving around season. And I would think, at least in the first half of the year, Brendan Sorsby would have been a name that would have been a really hot commodity. But now either that's fizzled out or he just really wants to be in Cincinnati. So good for the Bearcats. That's a big land, but I definitely thought at one point that he might find himself joining the John Mateers of the world and at least flirting with the possibility. And I guess he always still could because I don't know how ironclad those contracts are. But if he stays, then that's really good for Cincinnati. That's a good anchor for next year's team.
Yep. Bronco Mendenhall, former coach at BYU and West Virginia, is now the new Utah State head coach, and, of course, New Mexico. That's where he was. He's gone. I'm curious. The quarterback in New Mexico and the running back are both really good players. They're also in the portal. Do they follow him to Utah State, or they try to get bigger than Utah State?
Well, they could be following their new OC to Utah. That could be, or they could be following their OC to his new digs in Utah. That would be a place that would make a lot of sense for Devin Dampier, the quarterback, who I remember us talking about because they had like one of the first games of the year, and he was like, he flashed, and I forget who it was against. It was like a big game though, and I remember like seeing Devin Dampier and watching him those first couple games, and he was pretty fun. So, I think there's a strong possibility he could be heading to join up with Jason Beck, or he could, follow Bronco Mendenhall. So it looks like he's going to have some options. I don't know who his favorite coach is. So if he has a preference, he's got a couple of different places he could land, or he could be like, I'm done with all these guys. I want to see what's out there and see like who else comes calling. We'll see what the portal holds for him and his other teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, to your point, Jason Beck is the new OC at Utah. And I would not be surprised to see 3 guys from there, wind up, or if not more, wind up with Jason Beck or whatever, because Utah is a better upgrade than Utah State. Obviously, you're playing at the P4 level. So, but yeah, I think it's a really good hire. They had a really good offense at New Mexico this year, really dynamic, and they need to shoot some life into that side of the ball because it was all built around whether Cam Rising was healthy or not the last 2 years. And, really because they didn't have that built around anything other than Cam Rising, they kind of squandered 2 years at Utah.
Yeah, I think, first of all, going back to Bronco Mendenhall, and you keep mentioning the word Utah, like, cool reunion for him, go back to the state of Utah. So, like, that's the first thing that jumped to mind when I saw that headline. It's like, oh, Bronco Mendenhall's back in the state of Utah. But, yeah, I think you saw the Kurt Cignetti blueprint at Indiana, right, where he brought a bunch of his James Madison guys over and then potpourried that in with – transfer players from elsewhere and what Indiana already had on staff. So, yeah, I think there's a strong possibility that Bronco Mendenhall could take some of his New Mexico guys and take them to Utah State. But at the same time, also the possibility that Jason Beck would do that as well. I know with Utah's quarterback room that they had it wasn't a depth thing, it was an experience thing. Like, they had a bunch of quarterbacks, but a lot of those guys were young, and you just relied so heavily on Cam Rising that we saw what that turned into, and you had to turn to a couple of those other guys. They just weren't quite ready, especially to reach anywhere near his peak level when he was healthy. But, yeah, I think anything's up for grabs. So if you're a New Mexico football fan, I mean, you're waiting for the roster to just basically tatter and fall apart at this point with a couple of guys moving on. But, yeah, Devin Dampier, not surprised to see that as all, given all of the coaching movement. And I think he'll have some suitors. And, big shakeup there for Utah. That was needed. That offense was just bad. And what just a bad year it was overall. I think the refreshing thing is that you just don't really have to worry about the whole Cam Rising, will he, won't he be available problem any longer. I know he hasn't officially said, but it's pretty clear to thank you, but we need to we gotta go move on, man.
Also, sometimes you got to save people from themselves.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I think the Cowboys did that with Tony Romo.
Yeah, probably.
I think they did because, they're like, Tony, every time you get hit, you get hurt now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to get better.
Yeah.
You're not going to Benjamin Button this thing and age in reverse. You got to do it. And I think that Cam Rising, it's pretty clear, he's not, ready for contact anymore.
Right. And I think the most interesting part of that for me was the whole discussion that I saw kind of begin with Utah fans in the comments and the reports of the Jason Beck hire, which, okay, first of all, he's a BYU guy because, of course, he is, right? There's just the crossover between those two programs is insane. I can't imagine there's any two programs that have more coaching crossover than those two programs right there. But that's also what leads to such familiarity and love and hate, and the holy war being the high stakes that it is. But I wonder, with Morgan Scalley being the head coach in waiting, of how much say he has. And I don't remember where.
Probably a lot.
Well, you would think so, but do you know that? That's the thing is I saw somebody bring that up, and I can't remember. It's just a random comment of, well, do you think Scalley has any input? Because he has been named coach in waiting again for the second time, and there are still lingering questions about Kyle Whittingham and how long he's in the saddle, and even about next year of whether he's going to be back. I don't know that that's even 100% known, but clearly he's got to be having some say because he's making these coordinator moves. So, yeah, I'm curious of what the percentages are of how much is this Kyle Whittingham driving the bus on who the OC is and how much of it is also Morgan Scalley having input. Because if it's 99% Kyle Whittingham, well, that will seem to indicate he's back next year. But if Morgan Scalley's also got 45% or 50% of the say, well, that seemed to indicate we're getting pretty close to where this thing's going to finally move his direction and he's going to take over the program. But so that part of it to me of who's the more involved here is just telling about maybe the near-term future of Utah football. And I think that's a lot of interest to people. Yeah, absolutely. One more thing before Grayson Grunhafer in the next segment. By the way, thank you, Kim, for the super chat. Jacob Rodriguez, all Big 12 linebacker, coming back to Tech. So that's great news. That's great news. It's great news for Shield Wood for sure to have that guy back as well. This is Jake Dickert, coach at Wazzu, on where he feels things are with John Mateer right now and his possible departure for the transfer portal.
That roster retention, what is that process like, and how do you kind of go about that?
So I meet one-on-one with every kid after the year. I don't know what other head coaches do. We talk about their strengths. We talk about things they need to work on. They give me tons of feedback on their coaches, on myself, on our program. I love those times, but unfortunately, there is now an extreme business side to those conversations. And trust me, I've been Zooming and communicating with families because I think the one thing the second parties are doing are really getting to families, probably maybe over the kids nowadays. So I just have really good, hard, honest conversations. Some of them go the way you want. Some of them you're really worried about some of those players being ready for what's next. And, you just got to keep navigating a process and trying to figure out what's best for us.
What have those talks been like with John, and kind of where's his head at right now?
Those are private conversations. They've been really good. We've done an amazing job of putting together, a a package for John that I think is fair, and he knows his value here. He knows how much he's loved, and I think it really means something for him to be here. Like, I don't take that for granted. I also take a step back and want to mentor him, want to help him, want to navigate him through this, and the talks have been really, really positive, and we'll continue to navigate that as they go.
So there you go. I mean, I'm glad for Jake that he feels comfortable, but the Wolves are going to be at the door for a long time.
I mean, the Wolves are already
they've been
hanging out inside the house.
Yeah.
I mean, they've already gotten to the family, as you could hear him basically say that, which I don't know. Some of that's just, I don't know, just kind of gross, but also understandable because it's just business as well. But I think the people that are on the up and up, that's great. And then you wonder about the shadier characters. So hopefully the Mateer family is dealing with people on the up and up because they have a real deal business opportunity in front of them where he stands to make a lot of money next year, whether he stays in Pullman or he goes and follows his former OC to Norman, Oklahoma, which I wouldn't hate that because I saw a lot of John Mateer this year, and he's a very dynamic and fun player, and he obviously plays very well in Arbuckle's system, and they had a lot of success together. And Oklahoma also could use a quarterback because Jackson Arnold's officially in the portal, which I guess you guys probably talked about that on Wednesday.
Yeah,
I was out on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised to see that. I mean, it seemed like that's sort of where it was going, and one of those where it seemed healthier for both sides to just kind of start over.